So, hi, welcome to the Curated Conversations podcast. Welcome, Tommy. Tommy's from KayaPush. Tommy, can you tell us a little bit about KayaPush?
Thanks for having me, Eric. KayaPush, where do I start? So we started KayaPush when cannabis started becoming legal in Canada. And we're from the restaurant space. So KayaPush and Push are sister companies. I started Push with two co-founders in 2012. And we primarily worked for restaurants. And what we found was when the cannabis industry started getting legal, a lot of our restaurant clients got cannabis licenses, and there was just a need for a platform like ours in the cannabis industry. And we looked at there was actually no platform out there that served cannabis. All of the platforms that help businesses grow their people in cannabis were really white label solutions. We saw a huge need in the industry for that. So we started KayaPush, and I like to say that our platform helps cannabis companies understand their people more, understand their labor costs, and as well as help grow their people within the industry.
So you started the parent or sister company in British Columbia.
Yes.
And that's where your restaurant clients started buying up licenses. And it's still kind of the Wild West out there, right?
Well, British Columbia is actually, I would say Canada is in cannabis years. It's funny. It hasn't been that legal for that long, but in cannabis years, been around forever.
Yeah.
So in Canada, I believe legalization happened in
2018.
Yeah, 2018. So it's been some time.
Yeah, what I mean is the landscape for cannabis, dispensaries and grows in British Columbia has a lot of legacy. When we work in Canada, it's typically in the Ontario or Alberta areas, and it's not as loose, a little more structured.
Well, British Columbia is the Northern California, I like to say.
Yeah, it's a beautiful place to be. So when you identified this need in cannabis, how did you approach the cannabis market differently than you did the restaurant market?
Yeah, good question. The cannabis industry, if you think about a dispensary in general, right? In the restaurant industry, servers and employees are considered cost centers. So you always want to reduce your labor costs down to a percentage of sales. In the cannabis industry, that rings true, but employees, sales associates are really revenue centers as well. So that's where items per transaction, basket size, things like that. So it's in a sense, there's a lot of parallels between, the cannabis industry and the restaurant industry. We're dealing with hourly staff, potentially entry level, potentially part-time, but the parallels and in regards to just understanding what is the function of my staff in the cannabis industry or in a dispensary, really retail sales associates. And then in the restaurant industry, you have cost centers.
But it's similar in terms of function, I would imagine. You're trying to get people to purchase, be happy, but also you're trying to educate. It's more educational on the cannabis side, obviously. But, any server is a sales associate, any bud tender is a sales associate when you look at it from a revenue generation standpoint, right?
Yes, exactly. So that's where we're bringing that into the restaurant industry. So it's, for us, from our standpoint, servers, bud tenders, they're really salespeople too. They are educational people as well, because, when you have somebody that come in and they're asking you, hey, is this good? It's your opportunity. The canvas is yours. And that's the parallels that we see.
What I see in that, when you ask a bud tender, it depends on how educated they are and how the operation runs. In some cases, you'll get somebody saying, try the Jeter because we're getting kickbacks. And in other cases, they'll say, yeah, I tried this last night. I love it. I can tell you very clearly which one I prefer.
Yeah, we see it all the time. I visit a store. I try to visit a store every week. And within the first 2 to 5 minutes of going in, I already know how well that team is trained, and how effective the managers are at building a high-performing sales team.
Let's stay on that for a second. When you walk in, what are the key indicators of a good, well-run operation?
One, are there any bud tenders just standing around doing nothing?
Hmm.
That's number one. And it mind boggles me that that happens. So that's number one. What are the bud tenders doing? If it's not busy, how are they keeping themselves busy? Right? Or are they on their phones? Two is, how long does it take me to get greeted? Now it depends on the style of store, right? It really depends, but that's number two, what I look at. And number three is, when I'm having a conversation with the bud tenders, are they trying to understand what mood I'm trying to get in?
Hmm.
Why do I smoke? What is my reason for coming in, and why do I smoke? And when I tell them why I smoke, one, are they drawing that out of me, right? Two, when I tell them why they smoke, do they have the right inventory knowledge to recommend something that I haven't tried before? Hey, you might like this, right? So,
Well, how does a store owner have a highly trained staff when the turnover rate is so high, at like 50 whatever percent per year in the first year of employment, right?
well, if you think about, it's not unique to the cannabis industry. If you look at retail in general, the turnover is 60%.
But a lot of those skills are convertible,
Yes,
right?
but then it's yes and no. I truly believe that we should look at a dispensary like a retail operation
Mm-hmm.
and treat it like such. If you look at the restaurant industry, it's some restaurants have 80% turnover.
I guess what I'm saying by transferable is in the cannabis space, there's a steep learning curve to get into it in the beginning. And I'm going to guess a lot of the turnover is with new bud tenders. I'm just looking at, as an owner of a business, I would have a hard time keeping all these new people educated and going through the training process over and over and over again. It must be really challenging.
It is. Okay, so I break it down into two different markets, right? If you look at the emerging markets, we don't know, like for example, in New York, we don't know who who's gonna win the game from a supplier perspective.
Mm-hmm.
We don't actually have data on what to sell yet. So the market is still relatively new from a legal perspective. So you're gonna have to carry 500, 600 SKUs, and that becomes a nightmare in training. But when the market matures and as the consumer behavior matures, the ideal number of inventory SKUs that you should have is around 80 to 100, right? Which significantly impacts the training aspect of it.
Yeah.
So I always look at those two markets, and as an operator, I would always have to understand what market am I in, and is my training effective or
Mm-hmm.
ineffective in kind of what I'm trying to get done. From a training perspective, you do have to have the right training program when an employee starts. But the most effective training program that I see are either one, you leverage micro learning. There are times during the day when bud tenders are not helping customers. How are you leveraging this capital? Are they standing on the phones doing nothing? Or are you spending 5 to 10 minutes a day on understanding inventory? And a lot of successful retailers also have designated days to either learn inventory, like here's three inventory that you should learn. And maybe those three are inventory that's not selling well, inventory that is going to expire, etc. Right? So, the amount of stuff that people can learn is limited. So the consistency is there. Every Monday we're going to do this, and maybe every Thursday or Friday we're going to learn about something new that's coming through the door. And that consistency helps a lot.
Yeah, it certainly does. I was in a dispensary, one of my locals. I went in, there was an activation. So I asked the bud tender what's going on with the activation. They no answer. It's like, okay, you have this person in your shop presenting their flower. Shouldn't you have known who they are and what they do before they come in? I can point to more poorly run operations than well run operations, and you can tell the
Yeah.
difference because they look more like a Trader Joe's than they do a Target, where you get one choice of corn, right? There's not canned corn from 5 different manufacturers with all these different things. It's like, this is the one that we select. This is the one we like, and it might be private labeled with our label, but we
Mm-hmm.
only have that number of SKUs. We do not have a billion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it helps so much in the back end training and all the way through to sales. Yeah.
Yeah. So where does the owner sit in that?
That's a good question. Well, okay. So the question is, how big is the operation, and what's the skill set of the owner?
Hmm.
And that's, for me, that's a big one. Is um, does the ownership group have the skill set to be an operator? And some owners are great operators, and some owners aren't great operators.
Mhm.
So that's really on a case by case basis.
Well, what I see is a lot of folks that are starting their dispensaries. They want to operate it, firstly, because they enjoy it. Secondly, they don't know what they're in for. And thirdly, they can't afford to have another layer of management underneath them. And so it's challenging. I kind of wish there was a boot camp. Like Forte Operations has a boot camp for new store owners, and Forte gets them ready for that. But I wish there was more publicly accessible information that every state just handed to everybody that got a license, said, look, we don't have an SBA for this, right? But here's your toolkit, and this is how you can be successful in this industry. I think a lot of programs would really do well with that.
Yeah, I think definitely, for sure, 100%. Especially if you're new to business as well. So
Yeah.
you're learning two different kind of muscles here: business, and also running a retail shop that has, it can be very complex if you have a lot of SKUs.
Yeah. Well, it is complex. So let's get into KPIs that a store owner should look at on an ongoing basis. Managers obviously have their own set of KPIs, but as an owner, how do I know where the landmines are and what metrics I can look at to avoid those landmines as I'm going down this journey?
It's funny because I had a conversation the other day with somebody that wanted to open up a second location.
Yeah, okay. I know this conversation. Yeah.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's always, when you're, and I'll tie it into this, is how well do you understand your business?
Hmm.
Is the question that you should have when you're deciding on when to expand. Because if you understand your business well, then the second question for that is, can you replicate? Right? Or can you replicate the success in your first store to your second store? That's the second question.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, the level of understanding, or as a business owner, how you should look in your business is those two fronts. If I'm looking to expand, how well do I understand my business? If sales drop tomorrow, do I understand why?
Mm.
And do I understand my business well enough to maintain profitability?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the big, big topics.
Yeah.
Everything else kind of falls under that, right? So in terms of understanding your business is customers. Why do customers buy from you?
Mm.
Do you understand why your customers buy from you? And does this tie in with your brand promise? Do you have a brand promise, right? So that's number one. In terms of your sales, how much of it is new customers? How much of it is repeat customers, right? What is your baseline? How much of it is online? How much of it is in store? And how much of it is delivery?
Yeah.
Right? What are your margin, your operating margin, right? Your gross profit, sorry. What is your operating margin? What is your net margin? Those are three big things, right?
Totally. I would imagine that a lot of people don't truly understand the variables that they have to work with, right? You can look at the numbers, you can look at your margins and product and so on. But what makes one location successful is not necessarily the same as what makes another one. And also, timing is very important. If you're first to market, of course, money's going to be easy.
Yeah.
Of course, it's going to be a journey where you're like, hey, let's open 5 more of these. Shit, it's easy. It's not like that, right? It's a question of timing also.
Yeah, it is. It's funny because the more you understand your business, the better you understand on are things temporary?
Hmm.
Like, is this a temporary increase in sales that I'm experiencing?
Yeah.
Or is there a time lapse to what's happening? Because if you look at what recently happened in our industry during the pandemic, there was so much pandemic money floating around that if as an operator, if you weren't experienced enough, you didn't understand kind of what your baseline metrics are, you would fall in love with this new money thinking it's forever. But just understanding your business, you know that this is temporary and maybe I shouldn't overextend myself because this won't last forever.
Yeah, that's hard to see when you're in the weeds, though, right? The fog of war and all that.
Yeah, it is. It is. I always like to, there's a saying that rings so true in this industry is, and I think it's so true in life and in business. The most successful companies and the most successful people are the ones that make the most mistakes, right? But the name of the game and the trick is you can't make your mistake so big that it pulls you out of the game, that you can't play anymore. And that's like opening another location.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, great. This could be a mistake. And if it's that big, then you really have to understand what you're doing. And it's understanding your business.
Totally. 100%. I'm fortunate enough to have made a lot of mistakes very early on. And so for my journey, my mistakes are getting smaller. Mm-hmm. But every time you enter a new space, a new industry, a new vertical, whatever it is, there's so many things you just don't know. And no matter how many people you talk to, you don't really learn that until you're deep in it. And I guess I'm going to go back to KPIs. If you're a business owner, right, you own one of these shops, at what point, I guess, what are the key indicators on sales, just sales, of knowing if a dip in sales is transitory or permanent?
That's a good question. So in terms of sales, it's how many transactions are you doing a day? How many transactions are you doing a month? The number of transactions that you actually do matters so much, right? How many people are coming through your store?
Right.
And so that's one. And then how is your conversion on these transactions? What does that look like? What does that look like in terms of items per transaction and basket size?
Yeah.
So that's the holy grail in terms of the three things that you should look at. And then let's say if your sales drop, because I had this, my friend actually went through this. I have a friend, he has a dispensary, he does delivery and does sales, and he does not understand why he's experiencing churn. Why are customers not coming back? What is going on, right? Mm-hmm. What's going on? And it was just driving him crazy. But he understood that he was getting new customers, but he wasn't keeping his existing customers. Right. So that's another layer of data. Mm-hmm. So we had this conversation. I'm like, hey, when was the last time you spoke to any of your clients? Pick up the phone, you have their contact, talk to 50, right? Because to truly understand your business is understanding why clients buy from you and why clients don't buy from you. And unless you understand that, you don't really understand anything. So he picked up his phone, and what he found out was what got him to the dance, and the reason why he was successful was because of his brand promise. His brand promise was, my inventory, what I offer, is going to be affordable product, but really high quality. Those his brand promise. And he got away from that. He started having quads, really expensive, high quality stuff that it was inconsistent with his brand promise. So that's what he found out. He changed course a little bit, and sales started picking up.
Oh, that's great. That's really good stuff. Would a store manager know to look for that?
A store manager should, if they understand. So anytime that you hire somebody, they need to know their direction and what makes them successful in their role, right? So as a store manager, they're gonna, as an owner, as a manager, like you're managing someone, even the store manager managing their bud tenders, you have to let people that you're managing know very clearly, right? What makes this role successful, right? What are the three things that you're measured in? And hopefully your manager is really ambitious, and they're going to ask you, hey, so I want to get to here. So it's direction and clarity is what we always talk about. Being clear with what they need to do in order to move in the business. So the manager should.
Well, yeah. How do you interview for a store manager? What are you looking for? What are the key attributes to a decent store manager that could grow with this?
We can talk a lot about kind of the interview process, but I would say if you're looking for a manager of a store, I always break it down to three simple things. Very simple. One is people builder, right? Because at the end of the day, you're managing people. So you're going to be responsible for hiring, training, retaining key employees, right? And coaching them from young sales associates to professionals, right? So that's number one. Number two is, can you create a high functioning sales environment? Because at the end of the day, there's a puzzle to be solved. The bud tender position is transient, it's entry level, you're getting paid barely above minimum wage, and there's no commission. So how do you create an environment where people are engaged, right? And they want to service customers, they want to sell, and they're having fun, right? So those are the two big pockets. And then three for me is data driven, right? Can you leverage data to make decisions? And can you leverage data to direct resources to where it needs to go?
I get this. Do you test for that? Do you test for these attributes when you're an owner interviewing your store manager or your bud tender for that matter?
So my litmus test is always two things. Is when you're talking to somebody, have they done it before? And do they understand the nuance of failing and succeeding? Because generally what happens with people that are successful and people have done before is they can tell you their failures and what they've learned, right? That's number one, is can they go into the details? And you know, when we were interviewing, we use the concept of top grading. Top grading is a concept. And really what that is starting having a conversation about that person's journey from all the way from school, all the way to where they are today, what they've learned and why they are where they are today. So that's number one. So testing for it, not, you know, when you're having detailed conversations about somebody on their philosophy on hiring or their philosophy on coaching or their philosophy on KPIs, they should have enough depth to have that conversation. But for me, I always tell owners is, are you a better operator from talking to this candidate? You're interviewing somebody that is a expert in what they do. Have they made you a better operator? You should be a better operator talking to somebody for 3 hours about retail operations. And if you're not, probably not the right candidate. Right?
Love that. You know, the way that you're talking, it reminds me of how we talk about mature businesses, right? These are not mature businesses we're talking about. Fairly frequently, when we're starting to get engaged with somebody, they're just starting, right? We have two inflection points as a company. We have one when you're starting, second when you're scaling, and the third when you're looking at your exit. That's where we tend to play. In the beginning stages, owners typically are in a, you know, hurry up and wait sort of environment, right? You got your place, now you got to wait for your permit, you know, inspection, so on and so forth. Hiring tends to not be a huge priority until they absolutely have to. And at that point, it's more of a reactive hiring than it is a proactive hiring. And so it seems like a lot of the turnover that I've seen at a higher level, you know, at store manager level, it tends to be because those hires were made in a hurry and not done correctly because they had to grab something, and something's better than nothing.
Oh my gosh, I can't agree with you more. I feel like there's so much emphasis on opening day,
yeah,
and not enough emphasis on opening quarter,
yeah,
right? So and so all of your energy goes towards opening day, but when your doors open, that's when the race starts, and it's a marathon, right?
Totally.
That's not the end.
It's hard to ask then what when you're just trying to get to that first point, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you? I don't know that a lot of owners know what day two is going to look like, but that's really what you should be planning for. Day one, you know, after the fanfare is over, I got to run a business, and you got to run it the right way, or your competition starts moving in. It gets cutthroat pretty quickly.
Oh, it's, you know, I like to say that people, I shouldn't say everybody, but you know, there's a misconception that the margins are high and
Right.
we're gonna make money hand over fist. But if you compare the cannabis industry to even some restaurants, they have higher margins.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's pretty crazy when you think about the restaurant industry.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild. Well, how do you find these unicorns to hire in the beginning?
I'll tell you a story. I was early for a meeting, and I was 30 minutes early for a meeting, and it was a meeting in Harlem, is in New York. And I thought, hey, there's so many retail shops around me. Let's walk around and see the talent in this area. So I walk into the local champs, and I was immediately greeted by a helpful sales associate. Really polite, really helpful. And I was like, hey, this is actually a really well-run store. I go to the manager. I start talking to the manager. And I asked the manager about his philosophy on hiring, what he's learned, his philosophy on coaching, how they get their team motivated to sell. And he told me something that was surprising, that head office does not give them a budget to have contests for their team, sales contests, that the managers pool their own money to do these contests. I'm like, this guy, wow. they're so plugged in. Yeah. He cared so much about retail operations, about his people, all of these things, right? He was just very cerebral. So I just asked him, hey, you want to work in the cannabis industry? It's a young industry. It's growing. You can probably grow with it. He said, yes, I'm interested. It was that easy, right? And the thing is that I wish that I can walk into an office, talk to my next COO, but I can't. But in the retail industry, you can. You can walk into any retail shop, learn about their operations, talk to engage, energetic people that want to be in retail, and then potentially recruit them to your store.
Pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's a huge competitive advantage. And the funny thing is, maybe 5% of people out there will actually do it. And those are the people that have a leg up.
Yeah. That's really good advice. Walk in and talk.
Be mindful that it's not busy. Right? Just be mindful of people's time and just talk.
100%. 100%. So what are the most important people? Who are the most important people to hire as you were going on this journey? Who's the first hire you make right before you open? Is it the store manager? You start at the top and bring them into the hiring process?
Yeah, store manager, because the store manager will help you hire everybody else. And you never want to hire, if you can, hire somebody that's going to report to somebody that you've hired. Like, if that makes sense, like the store manager. And, if you're hiring a really exceptional store manager, guess what? A players want to work with A players.
And they also bring their friends.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Who are A players.
Yeah.
Right. And that
they know the people that they want to work with again.
Yeah. And that helps so much. So you start from the top, you hire your manager.
Yep.
And it just cascades.
Half of our team here in LA is from the same group of people that worked together at Brookstone and then Paper Source, and now they're here.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're all of a pretty high caliber because they just brought the people that they know are very competent and they love to work.
A players want to work with A players. You're not going to bring somebody in that's terrible.
That's exactly it. And the funny thing is that loyalty is not to the person, it's to the role in the company. And so we've had situations where people haven't exactly panned out, and A players know it, and A players can see it, and they can be objective about it and not be so attached to an individual to know what's good for them and the company.
Yeah.
Pretty great.
Yeah. It saves so much work and time because you're not clipping at 100% hiring somebody, but when you can, because it's a referral from somebody that's really great, awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's get a little bit into HR, because the HR is a really, really broad. It's huge. It's a huge subject, but it's also one of the more complicated ones. People be peopling, and there's always a problem with people. HR in cannabis companies, I would say, is one of the least mature in a very immature market. So how does somebody without an HR manager or director, an owner who's not used to having all these people around, how do you protect your business? How do you protect your employees? How do you make it all work when you're not an HR person?
Ah, so you're talking about, when I think about HR, I think about people strategy, and I think about as an organization, you're hiring people to represent you, the business owner, right? So everybody that you bring onto your team is really an extension of you,
Mm.
right? As a business owner, you're super plugged into the business. It's your business. You have your life savings on the line. So yeah, you're going to be engaged, right? When I think about HR is how do you get as a business owner people that you work with, the team that you hire as engaged as you are in the business? And that's the name of the game. So that's number one. That's HR to me, right? So that's the puzzle that you're trying to solve as a business owner is how do I get my employees engaged, right? How do I get them to care half as much as I do? Because if they do that, we're going to the moon, right? That's HR. We can talk about that, or we can talk about kind of the legal, kind of the, protect yourself.
Well, I look at it, it's interesting because I look at the former as culture and the second as HR. Culture to
Uh,
me and HR are separate. I think culture has to live on its own or else it gets lumped in with punitive actions and all the stuff that goes on
yeah,
with HR, right? Employee handbooks and all that stuff. It's less about that and it's more about the vibe and the
yeah.
enjoyment and so on. Typically, so let's stay on that for a second. Most companies that are starting out do not have guiding principles. They don't have a mission and a vision and all the stuff that larger or more established companies have. What they have is a hopefully charismatic person running it that can bring people along for the ride. But how do you sustain the vibe over time?
That's a good question. And I always think about the foundation. So the foundation, when you think about culture, culture is it's a very corporate word.
Interesting.
What is corporate culture? What is culture? How do you define that? You type about corporate culture in Google, it gives you a definition that doesn't really make sense to an average person,
Right.
right? Culture to me is defined as what are the words that your employees use to describe your business? That is your culture, right? In layman's terms, right?
I like that.
So you ask your team, hey, give me 3 words that describe this business. You put those 3 words into a graph. The bigger the word is, the more times that word is being used. That is your culture.
Hmm.
So as a business owner, the foundation is always what are the 3 words that I want to describe my business,
Hmm.
right? How do I want my employees to describe my business when I ask them? And that's the foundation. So everything that you do needs to be very intentional in making sure that when you ask your employees a year from now, 2 years from now, that they're going to use those 3 words because that's your North Star.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
love that. I had such a visceral reaction when you said that culture is a corporate word. And I'll tell you why, because I studied cultural anthropology in college. I actually have my degree in it. And you see culture being plastered all over the place. I never thought of it as like a synergy type word that was immediately associated with, dudes and ties. To me, the culture is just a more formal way of saying vibe, of saying,
Uh,
how you exist in a social group.
yeah.
Interesting stuff. Let's move over to the actual, the HR components of it, where you do need your employee handbook and you do need to make sure that everybody's adhering to it and clocking in on time and so on. Right? If you have the cultural or whatever we want to call it part, on locked in, it's a lot easier to not have a lot of HR issues on
Mhm.
an ongoing basis because people are invested and they want to show up and they want to do a good job and so on. And those issues tend to be incidental or accidental and so on. But let's say you're a store manager, right? Let's put the store manager hat on, you're working for an organization that you run the culture on the day to day, but it's not your business. You're in a tough spot sometimes because the culture isn't aligned with what you're seeing on the day to day. Right. So how do you, as a store manager, somebody's tardy a little bit, the owner shows up whenever they want. You're the store manager that has to make sure that their people show up on time, but they're seeing that the owner of the company is anything but organized.
That's a really, really difficult position. And I hope that the store manager has a good relationship with the owner, that you can sit down and you can talk to the owner about, hey, what is the environment that you want to create? Yeah. What is the environment that you want to create? How plugged in or how engaged do you want our team to be? How important is that to you? And just flesh through kind of what the goals are, because that would be the North Star in terms of how we show up. Because at the end of the day, employees look at the person on the top.
100%.
And you set that example, right? And everybody will follow. So I don't think anything changes much unless the owner kind of changes and the owner shows up differently.
Or doesn't show up.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, one or two, but you can't set the example for the team and expect the team to behave differently.
Yeah. I think a lot of people get into that problem. And this goes across every industry.
Well, the biggest problem that I see is, and this may be related, is that people go into business for the business to serve them and not to serve the business, right? You start a business. Hey, guess what? In any business that you start, it's going to take some time before you can pick fruit from that tree.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start picking fruit from that tree too early, the tree never grows. And this is it's not somewhat related to that, but you're as an owner, you're there to serve the business, and that's a big thing.
But it kind of is. It kind of is related because people get detached when they see something's working for a day or two at a time. It's easy to take a step back and say, "Oh shit, this is on autopilot. I'm going to go take off." Right. But we both know that as time goes on, things start spinning and spinning out. And unless there are those guardrails, you get out of alignment incredibly fast, no matter how good your store manager is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a journey. So let's tie it into KayaPush and how KayaPush makes all of these challenges that we've discussed easier for the owners. And
so our ethos has always been twofold. I mean, we started the business in the platform in giving operators ultimate control on their labor costs. Just you understand your labor costs. So that's kind of the basis of the initial starting point of the company. So in order to carry out, do you understand your labor costs, is having your employees clock in through a platform, scheduling them through the platform, understanding when employees show up late, show up on time, working more than what they're scheduled, and ultimately pulling in sales data from the POS so you have full visibility in, are you efficient with your labor costs? So that's like the first ethos of it. Because, if I were to ask you, if you were to tell me, hey, my labor costs were $1 million last month, I have no idea. Is that good? Is that bad? Without comparing it to sales. Right? It's very incomplete. So that's the ethos of us. And then is we want to empower business owners, small business owners, with the automation and the processes of large MSOs, multi-state operators. As a business owner, it's kind of counterintuitive when you think about it. You're the jack of all trades. You pretty much do everything, right? Especially when you start a business. You do everything until you get your business to a certain point where you can hire experts to take on what you're doing, and then that's how you scale. But because you do everything, you need processes in place and automations in place to help you, right? Hiring, digital onboarding, applicant tracking system, all these things that can help you manage your people and grow your people. And that's more or less what our platform does, is we give the tools that are being used today by companies that have 10,000 employees to smaller operations to help business owners grow and scale their business.
So you're helping them go from that tribal setup to a more structured, what's the word I'm looking for? Tribal or corporate, or tribal or institutional, if you will. I know it's a big word. But, when people are beginning, it's a lot of word of mouth. It's a lot of, this is how I've done it. Mm-hmm. And they put the SOP book in the back. You pull it out if they need it for inspections and whatever. And then it all kind of goes on that tribal knowledge. And as an owner, sitting down and writing this down or going over the process is really hard. Does Kaya provide any SOPs or have an SOP component to it?
Yeah, so we built our platform to have automations in place to ensure that things that you follow are doing correctly. For example, I think we've recently launched this. It's either we recently launched it or we're launching it this week. The ability for you to create a handbook in our platform based on the jurisdiction that you're in.
Great.
Right. So you create that handbook, you digitize it, you upload it to our employee digital onboarding. So now when you send employees a job offer through our platform and they sign and they get onboarded, they can also sign their digital handbook as well. So all of that is done on our platform.
So you have an ATS also?
Yeah, we have an ATS, yeah.
Can you tell everybody what that is and how it works?
That's great. So our applicant tracking system is the ability for you to centralize your applicants from different job boards, say Indeed, for example, etc., into one central place. And then from there, you can manage your candidates. So you can standardize interview questions, interview through our platform, manage how many people are involved in the interview process, communicate with candidates and where they are, start sorting different candidates here and there. What's neat about us is because we built our platform for multi-locations, you can have analytics on which location is hiring best, which location is it, and then start assessing not just how your location performs, but your manager performance as well, right? And if this location is doing well, crossbreed. So that's our ATS, and then from there you can send job offers through our platform digitally, have employees sign, and then onboard employees digitally.
That's huge. That solves a lot of problems. Really,
it does.
If people use it.
Yeah, because turnover is so high, and if you're a store that has 12 employees, you're going to be hiring an employee every other month.
Right.
From a kind of just a simple math perspective, and that's such a pain for owner operators.
It is, and the onboarding and offboarding of employees is a giant pain because that's just a lot of administrative work and making sure that everything is done correctly. And then you have to get into point of sale training and the product training and all the other stuff that goes along with it. Saving that time is actually a really big deal. I didn't realize that you did have an ATS, and it's really great. I love that.
Yeah, we're expanding our platform this year as well. We are going to add on the ability for employees to ask our AI chat, hey, what are the company rules surrounding this? And then based on kind of what you have in your handbook, our AI bot will answer the question.
Yeah, we're doing that on the tech side where we have AI chatbots are like, well, how do I enter a refund or something along those lines, and it just pulls from the docs. It's pretty amazing how AI is turbocharging things.
That's amazing. And that's going to extend itself to LMS.
Right. As a technologist, I look at that and I think how cool it is. And I'm excited that we're building these tools, but I'm also unconvinced that people are going to go out of their way to actually use them. We obviously have to work it into the workflow, but you know how people.
Yeah, it may be early, and it depends on, it really depends on the application.
Yeah. Are you thinking of using AI for scheduling purposes? So
we do have an auto schedule.
Mm,
So based on the parameters that you've set, I want budget as my number one consideration. I want based on my ranking of employees, etc. AI can schedule employees based on your ideal percentage of revenue. If
yeah.
that makes sense, right?
So I'm looking forward, and my AI is putting my best salespeople in the shop on 420.
Yeah, exactly.
It's great. That's
Yeah,
really helpful.
yeah. But you know what
Amazing.
I found is you can use an AI for that. But what would be also, as a dispensary, your manager should be so plugged in
Yeah.
in how you schedule because you're
Oh, yes.
yeah.
I completely agree with that. I also think that taking as much off of people's minds is really the key to unlocking the rest of the potential.
Mhm.
Make things easy. Just make it easy so they don't have to think about that thing. They can
Yeah.
check it, but they're not doing the thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly it.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. My guard dog is making sure that everything's cool in the office. Yeah, good girl. All right. Well, is there anything else that we should know about you or KayaPush that we haven't covered that people would say, "Oh shit"?
That's a good question. I always when I talk to entrepreneurs and business owners in this industry, I always ask them, what is your goal? What do you want
Hmm.
to do? What do you want to build? And the common answer is always, I want to build an empire. I want to build an empire. I want to build something great. My follow-up question is always, who do you look up to in this industry?
Hmm.
And who do you want to emulate? And and the people that you look up to, why do you look up to them? And is it because of their sales? Is it because they have tight operations, etc.? So, I want to leave business owners with that is where is it you want to go? Who is it that you look up to? Because we all need heroes. We all need role models. And if you can't find a role model in this industry because industry is young, look into other industries. For example, the restaurant industry. It's very, very hard to run a restaurant. Very hard. You're dealing with perishable goods. You're dealing with thin margins. It's a really good industry to look into in terms of like having tight systems and processes and how other companies do it. Because some restaurants grow up to 1,000 locations. I can't imagine the operational logistical nightmare it takes to get to that size.
Yeah. A good way for people that are just getting into the industry to do that is to join associations, show up, ask questions, and talk to people. We're doing a lot of engagements at local associations because people are showing up and asking good questions. And if that's not happening, and you just don't know who to learn from.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're reading blog posts that are really just self-promotional as opposed to getting the real info.
Yeah, that's a huge thing. That's really good advice is go out there and talk to people.
Yeah. Amazing. Tommy, it's always a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on.
Of course. I think that's it for today. Thanks for joining us for the curated conversation of the week. And look forward to seeing you, Tommy, hopefully very soon, and everybody else whenever we get to it. See you guys. Thank you.